Have you ever had the feeling that someone was watching you but you couldn't see them? The kind you feel deep in your chest, like a whisper pressed against the back of your neck. When I was 23, fresh out of college, I moved into a tiny studio apartment in the north side of Chicago. It wasn't much, just one room, one window, and one door that always stuck when it rained. But it was cheap, and for someone juggling 2 jobs and drowning in student debt, that was good enough. The window faced a narrow alley. Across the alley stood another building, practically a mirror of mine. Same layout, same windows. But that side always seemed darker. Still, I didn't think much of it at first. The following nights blurred together in a strange rhythm. I'd come home just before dawn, and as routine took over, jacket tossed on the chair, microwave humming, lamp clicked on, I'd glance at the window across the alley. And each time, as if on cue, the curtain would shift. At first, I told myself it was nothing. A neighbor, perhaps, a harmless night owl with a habit of glancing outside. But the timing, it was always too precise. The movement didn't happen hours later. It didn't happen when the sun rose. It happened the exact second my light flicked on, as if the person across the alley had been sitting there in the dark, waiting for me to return. So I began testing it. Some nights, I kept the lights off entirely and crept to the window, watching the apartment across like a hunter stalking prey. The curtain remained still. Other nights, I flicked on only the dim couch lamp from across the room, watching carefully to see if that would trigger it. Every time, without fail, the curtain stirred. A chill settled in my gut. I thought maybe it was the same feeling women have when they know they're being followed on the street. It's not about what you see, it's about what you sense. I tried talking to people about it. My coworkers laughed it off. My best friend Jamie said I was overworked and spiraling. I even wanted to believe that. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. And still, I told no one that the feeling wasn't going away. In fact, it was getting worse. It was a Thursday night or maybe Friday morning. I remember the sky still wore that deep pre-dawn indigo, the kind that tricks your eyes into thinking it's darker than it really island. Work had run longer than usual. By the time I trudged up the stairs to my apartment, my feet were numb and my mind was fried. That's when I saw it, wedged neatly into the top corner of my doorframe. At first, I thought it was another takeout menu. The building always had random flyers stuck in weird places. I almost ignored it, but the paper was crumpled, like someone had squeezed it in their fist before straightening it again. I pulled it down. One word, written in a rushed, slanted hand with blue ink. Hey. My throat tightened. The note was small, maybe torn from a notepad. Nothing remarkable except for the sheer audacity of its simplicity. My mind leapt immediately across the alley. My hand was already on the window lock before I realized what I was doing. I slid it open and looked out into the dark. The curtain in the opposite apartment was still, fully drawn, unmoving. No flicker, no shift, no glimpse of a hand. But somehow, that stillness felt more menacing than all the nights before. That night, I didn't sleep, not because I was scared, but because I realized something worse. Someone might have known me longer than I knew them. By Saturday morning, I couldn't pretend anymore. I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to get them. My landlord, Vince, lived on the first floor, an older man. When I told him I wanted to see the apartment across the alley, the one directly facing mine, he raised an eyebrow and said that unit's been empty since spring. I froze. We climbed the narrow stairs of the neighboring building. The hallway was dim, the kind of dark that clings to the walls even when the lights are on. When Vince unlocked the door, it stuck at first, swollen from humidity. The air hit me first, stale, old dust and wood rot. The place was bare, no dishes, no trash, no leftover socks or forgotten chargers. But then, the back room. It was smaller than I expected. The only window faced directly across to mine. And right there, centered perfectly in front of it, was a single metal folding chair. Nothing else. No rug, no table, just the chair. I stepped closer, and that's when I saw it. Tiny scuff marks in the dust around the chair's feet, like someone had dragged it slightly forward, then back, over and over again. And something else, a faint indentation in the seat's surface, as if someone had been sitting there for hours, night after night. The police came that afternoon. Vince called them, probably out of guilt or confusion, I'm not sure which. They dusted for prints, took a few photos, asked me some questions I couldn't really answer. They examined the chair, the nails on the windowsill, even the faint scuff marks in the dust. But without any concrete evidence, there wasn't much they could do. One of the officers shrugged and muttered something about urban weirdos and how buildings like these attract the wrong kind of attention. I didn't argue. I didn't need them to believe me. I already knew what I saw and what I felt. That night, I didn't go back to my apartment. My best friend Jamie picked me up, and I slept on her couch with the blinds drawn tight and a kitchen knife under my pillow. I officially broke my lease 3 days later. Vince didn't fight it. I think he knew it was the right thing. I moved across town into a place with no direct windows, just skylights. For a while, it helped. I kept myself busy. I told myself it was over. But then, about a month later, I came home after a late shift at my new job. It had rained that evening, and the hallway outside my apartment smelled faintly of wet cement and old newspapers. I fumbled with my keys, shivering slightly, and that's when I noticed something on the floor. A folded piece of paper, soaked around the edges. Inside, in the same crooked handwriting as before, was a single word. Hey. No address, no name. I froze, eyes darting around the hallway, half expecting someone to step out from the shadows. I haven't seen the curtain since. Haven't felt that heavy weight of eyes pressing through the glass. But now, sometimes, when I wake in the middle of the night and the room feels just a bit too still, I wonder. Maybe he never cared about the window. Maybe it was never about the apartment at all. Maybe he was always watching me. Have you ever delivered a pizza to a house where not a single light was on, but someone was already standing at the door? I was 26, still figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. At the time, I was working nights for a small pizza shop in a sleepy little town. I didn't ask for the night shift, it just kind of happened. The guy before me got busted for a DUI, and next thing I knew, I was the one driving through pitch-black neighborhoods. I really didn't want this shift because you never know if people who order late at night actually want a pizza, or if they have other intentions in mind. Unfortunately, my boss was an asshole and essentially told me if I wasn't willing to work the night shift, I was fired. I wasn't exactly in a position where I could be out of work, albeit temporarily, so I reluctantly worked the shift. You ring a doorbell, smile politely, get your tip, and you're gone in under a minute. But one house, it changed everything. It sat right on the edge of our delivery zone, technically still within range, but just far enough that no one wanted to go there. A duplex on a quiet block, normal modern houses all around, but this one felt different, like it didn't want to be part of the neighborhood. I remember the first time I pulled up. It was nearly 11 p.m. The street was silent. Not a single window glowed from inside that house. No porch light, no flicker of TV light through the curtains. And yet, as I stepped out of my car, the front door creaked open. Before I even touched the bell, someone was waiting. He stood in the doorway like he'd been there for hours, tall, wiry, probably in his late 40s. His skin was pale, almost sickly under the porch's dim yellow bulb that flickered once, then went out entirely. He just stared at me, didn't blink, didn't smile. I cleared my throat. Hey, large pepperoni? Still nothing. Then, finally, his eyes seemed to wake up, like he just remembered where he was. Sorry, he said slowly. I just got off work, zoned out a bit. Then, he handed me the exact amount in cash. No tip, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get back to the safety of my car. As I was handing him the box, he said something that caught me off guard. "You're really beautiful, you know that?" I paused, smiled politely. It wasn't the first time I'd gotten a compliment on a delivery, but something about the way he said it felt off, like he was reciting a line he'd practiced in the mirror. I turned to go, and he stood there, watching me walk all the way back to my car. A few nights later, I got a delivery order to the same address, same house, same time. When he opened the door this time, he looked excited, like he'd been waiting for this. "Hey, it's you again. How are you?" "Tired," I said truthfully. "Can't wait to go home." He chuckled. I know that feeling. As he fumbled with his wallet, he asked me something that made the hairs on my arms. "Can I get your number? I'd love to hang out sometime." I hesitated. My brain screamed no, but I couldn't find my voice. Finally, I muttered, "I have a boyfriend." His smile vanished. "Oh, I see." We stood there in silence. Just silence, the kind that presses on your chest. Then I turned and walked away. I could feel him still watching me, watching every step. A week went by. I didn't hear from him. No deliveries to 48B, no strange encounters. And then, just when I started to think maybe it was just a weird moment, his name showed up again on the delivery slip. Same address, same time, 10:30 p.m. Driving back to that street felt different this time. My headlights cast long shadows on every mailbox and fence post, and his house still had no lights on. But as I got out of the car and walked toward the porch, the door flung open before I even reached it. He stood there, wearing a suit, not like he just came from work, no tie. The jacket hung off him weird, like he'd borrowed it, like he wasn't used to wearing anything that formal. "Sorry if I scared you," he said, laughing. "Saw you coming up the sidewalk. Figured I'd save you the trouble of ringing." My skin prickled. There was no light inside the house, not a lamp, not a flicker of a TV. So how long had he been sitting there, in the dark, watching? Then he stepped forward, too close. "Would you like to go on a date with me, tonight?" My throat dried instantly. I gave the same excuse. "I have a boyfriend." He leaned in. I could smell something stale on his breath. "Come on, there's no way someone like you is really taken. Not seriously. Let me show you how a real man treats a woman." He grabbed the pizza box from my hands, tossed it aside like trash, and then gripped both my arms, tight. His grip was iron, cold, calculated, like he'd rehearsed this moment in his mind, over and over again. I tried to pull back, whispering, "Please, I just want to go home." His expression didn't change. "I don't care. Get inside. Now, we're gonna have a good time." He started dragging me toward the darkened doorway, and that's when I saw it. His other hand was digging into his coat pocket, fumbling for something. A knife. I didn't wait to find out how big it was. With my free arm, I punched him, hard, right in the stomach. I don't even remember thinking, just moving. He gasped, loosened his grip for half a second. That was all I needed. I ripped my arm free and ran, full sprint. I didn't scream. I didn't look back. I just bolted to my car like my life depended on it, because it did. But I wasn't fast enough. He caught up just as I yanked open the driver's side door. He grabbed me by my jacket, tried to pull me backward. I saw the knife glint in the moonlight as he screamed, "Why are you making this so difficult?" In blind panic, I grabbed the nearest thing, half a bottle of soda from the cup holder, and whipped it at his face. It connected. He stumbled. I dove inside, slammed the door, locked it. He lunged again, this time throwing himself onto the hood of my car. His body sprawled across the windshield, knife in hand, slashing at the glass. I screamed, slammed the car into reverse. The tires screeched as I peeled out of the driveway, trying to shake him off. He pounded on the hood, screaming at the top of his lungs. I took the next turn without braking. He flew off. I didn't stop driving. I didn't even think. I just kept going, turn after turn, trying to disappear into the dark. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the wheel. I made it back to the pizzeria somehow. My coworker took one look at me and dropped everything. I collapsed into his arms, sobbing, the words tumbling out between gasps of air. Everyone stopped what they were doing and gathered around. The fear in my voice made them all fall silent. Even my boss, who never once took anything seriously, looked like he'd seen a ghost. He didn't argue, just handed me the office phone and said, "Call the cops." The officers arrived fast. I gave them my statement, showed them the bruises on my arms, the scratches on my car. They nodded grimly. They'd heard of men like this, seen how close it could come to being something far worse. My coworker followed me home that night. I locked every door and window, collapsed into bed, fully clothed, and fell asleep like I'd outrun death itself. The next day, I quit, but I didn't feel free. I jumped at every noise, double-checked every lock. I didn't go anywhere alone. I kept thinking, he's still out there. 2 days later, the police called with an update. The house was owned by his brother. The man lived alone on one side of the duplex, while his brother and wife lived quietly on the other. They had no idea what he'd been doing. Turns out, he'd been in and out of prison for years. Robbery, assault, and eventually sex crimes. He'd only been out for 5 months. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. For weeks, I lived in fear that he'd come back, that he'd find me and finish what he started. I don't believe in wishing death on anyone, but I did believe in one thing that night. I would never deliver another pizza again. And to this day, every time I pass a house with no lights on, I wonder if someone's still standing at the door, watching. Have you ever felt like you were being watched, but when you turned around, no one was there? It was a quiet afternoon, the kind of afternoon that feels safe, familiar. I was just a kid, 9 years old, home alone for the hour before my mom would return from work. It wasn't anything unusual, but that day, something felt off. I had done everything as usual, locked the front door, double-checked the back patio door, and dashed upstairs to escape into my PlayStation world. My house, a small terraced home nestled in a busy neighborhood, felt secure. My mom always trusted me to be alone for an hour, but that afternoon, I wasn't alone. As I sunk deeper into my game, I heard it, a soft, almost plaintive sound. A meow? I froze, thinking of my cat who had been missing for over 3 months. Could it be him, returning at last? The hope surged in me, pushing me to rush downstairs, heart pounding with anticipation. But the moment I reached the window above the patio, everything came crashing down. My eyes locked onto a figure. A man, tall and hunched, with messy black hair hanging over his face. He stood on the patio, eerily still, as though waiting for something. I blinked, thinking my mind was playing tricks, but no, he was there. He was making high-pitched, unnatural sounds, like a cat, but not quite. It was a grotesque imitation. I felt a cold chill shoot down my spine as I stared, unable to move. My breath caught in my throat when I realized he wasn't just making noises. No, this man was eating. From the ashtray, I could see the brown liquid running from his mouth, and I realized with horror he was chewing on my dad's discarded cigarette butts. His eyes, obscured by his hair, stayed locked in some distant gaze as he continued his repulsive act. I screamed, louder than I ever thought possible, but there was no response. He didn't flinch, didn't even look up. Frozen in shock, I couldn't tear myself away from the sight. I turned and ran back upstairs, locking the door behind me. I could still hear the high-pitched sound echoing through the house. I called my mom immediately, hands shaking as I dialed. I had never been more terrified in my life. She called the cops, but I knew it would be too late. The fear didn't subside. It only grew worse. I lay in bed under the covers, shivering in fear, my mind racing. I heard the police arrive, voice shouting from outside, demanding the man step away from the patio. The man didn't answer. The noise only grew louder, more frantic. I strained to listen through the window, the tension rising with each passing second. Then I heard it, something far worse than the meowing. the man screamed, a horrible, bone-chilling scream that tore through the air. I wanted to close my eyes, to block out the sounds, but I couldn't. My gaze was fixed on the scene below. 2 officers had arrived. 1 man, 1 woman. I saw them approach the fence, but the man was out of my line of sight. I could hear the police shouting at him, demanding he come forward, but his scream only intensified. And then, he charged. I watched in horror as the man lunged at the female officer, knocking her to the ground with surprising force. The male officer immediately tased him, and the man fell, convulsing on the ground. Even then, he continued to scream. It took everything in me not to run downstairs, not to be a part of whatever nightmare was unfolding. The officer struggled to subdue the man, but eventually they had him handcuffed. His eyes met mine through the window. His expression shifted, and he said something that I'll never forget. "I sure as hell hope you didn't see all that." I burst into tears. My heart was racing, my body trembling with fear. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have possibly guessed, was that the true story behind this horrifying event would haunt me in ways I never imagined. The night dragged on in a haze of fear, and I couldn't shake the images of that man standing on my patio, making those grotesque sounds, chewing the cigarette butts like they were something normal. My heart still pounded in my chest as I lay there, beneath the safety of my covers. My mom arrived home soon after, and the weight of what had happened hung heavy between us. She tried to comfort me, but I could tell she was just as shaken by the events as I was. The police promised they'd come back to explain things, but when they did, I wasn't prepared for what they told me. The officer who had been there earlier, the one who had witnessed the horrifying scene unfold, sat down with my mom and me in the living room. "The man you saw on your patio, the one who terrified you like that, his name is Tom." He went on to explain that Tom was a man with severe autism, the kind of autism that caused him to grow stronger with time, his muscles tense and unyielding, his reactions unpredictable. Tom had escaped from a facility about 5 miles away, a place meant to help people like him, but apparently something had gone wrong. The officers had been tracking him down for days after he went missing. Then came the revelation that made my stomach drop. The officer told me that Tom had actually lived in my house 5 years earlier. He had been taken away after his mother, who had been his sole caretaker, died. The poor man had nowhere to go after that. With no family to speak of and no one to help him, he wandered. But in his mind, he believed this house, my house, was still his home. He thought he could return to his mother, that she'd still be here, waiting for him. That's when it clicked. The man I had seen outside wasn't just some random stranger. He was a lost soul, clinging to the only thing he knew, the only thing that felt familiar to him. He was dangerous, but it wasn't because he wanted to hurt anyone. It was because he was deeply confused, lost in his own mind. Still shaken, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for Tom. But I wasn't sure if that would be enough to erase the fear he had instilled in me. The next few days would leave me with more questions than answers. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking about Tom. They promised to keep him at the facility and ensure he was safe. I kept wondering what it must have been like for him, so disconnected from reality, searching for something he couldn't understand. The police assured my mom and me that he wouldn't be back, but the truth was, I wasn't sure if I could ever feel truly safe in my own home again. Tom had lived here, and that fact would stick with me for years.